Okay guys, good morning. Welcome to your Comp206 assignment 4. As we talked in class, today we're going to finish the application that we started last week. Since we had the makeup test this week, we couldn't finish the application. However, just for you to have the whole experience for this assignment, I will start over from the beginning and we will finish with the application. Anyway, so let me show what we got so far. Week 9, I believe it is. Yes. So far what we have is, let me show you. Let me start my SAM project. Okay. Don't worry, I will do those steps since the beginning. Okay. So I'm going to check. Come to a 6. 9 plus. There you go. So I don't know if you can remember this application, but basically what we have to do is, what we can do is actually put the phone book, any name that we want, Peter Parker, for example, and I put the New York City as an address, right? And if you enter the new content, it seems like nothing has happened, right? Because I don't have any response from the server, it seems like everything is fine. But if you click from book, then you have Peter Parker over here, and like a pseudo or mini version of our phone book. So basically the application should, whenever I click any of these items, the information will show here, and I can edit directly to the database. Okay, and another button has to be added over here in order to delete that specific item. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is we are going to close the cover or the cycle for this application. Okay, I think it's the best way to do it. I like you will be able to insert things that you already know, delete, edit, and search for an item, a specific item. Because what you already know is how to retrieve the whole information, but you don't know how to retrieve one single item from the database. Okay? Now, let's begin with this. So I'm going to close everything just for you guys to... Actually, I'm going to close this guy. I'm going to start fresh as always, so you guys understand every single step I'm going to do. Now, I'm not going to close the IDE because it takes a little bit long to open it. Anyway, so you have your environment over here. It's totally clean. Now, the first thing we have to do is what? Create the folder where I'm going to work. You guys still having problem with this? Please make sure you know where you work. This is the most important thing, because if you don't know, you're gonna make mistakes, especially during the test. Okay? So I know I have to work in the SAM folder of my server, right? So I'm going to look for the SAM folder. Remember, if you use the default options for the installation, it should be in C drive. But in my case, I don't have it there because I put it in a specific location in my drive. I like to actually order everything by project, you see. Anyway, so in SAM, you will find this folder called htdocs. So inside htdocs, that's where you are going to create your environment, your specific site where all the files will be stored during your development, okay? In my case, will be Comp206 and I will create a new folder called week 10. Okay, cool. Now inside here you can create a new project. Okay, all you have to do is looking for this specific folder, and you will be able to reach it during the web browser. Remember, htdocs is the same as in localhost. This is equal to localhost. Okay, so that means whatever you type after the htdocs has to be typed in your Chrome Explorer as well. For example, if I want to reach the content of this comp206, I have to type what? Localhost, right? Localhost, because htdocs is equal to localhost / comp206. So I'm going to open my SIM folder, and I will start the Apache. Okay, nice. Now if I go back to the localhost, as I told you, there should be a folder called comp206, and you can see if you compare the content, it's exactly the same, right? Look at this. We have the new project, email, list short, week 1, week 2, week 3, and so on and so forth. So everything is in here. The only thing that is not represented is the .idea folder. It is because this is a system folder and it's not recognized by the Apache. Alright? So in week 10, if I open this, it's empty. So if I click here, you see there is nothing there. Now, in your IDE, you should have the week 10 folder. If you don't, all you have to do is following the procedure to create a new project in your NetBeans, okay? And make sure you are addressing this week 10 folder inside your htdocs folder. So remember, localhost is equal to htdocs folder. Everything that is inside htdocs can be reachable, or everything that is inside htdocs can be reachable using localhost, come to the name of the folder, the name of the file, and so on and so forth. Okay? Alright. Now, I hope I was clear with this. Now, let's go to start a new project over here. Let me close these guys over here. Sorry about that. Okay. So I'm going to create, the first thing I'm going to do is create a new file, HTML file. Okay. Now, in this one, I will call it index.html. All right. Remember, it has to be HTML5. In the case if you're using NetBeans, I believe the only option that you will have is HTML5, I believe. I don't remember. But anyway, it has to be HTML5 file. Okay? So click OK. And you should have something very similar like to this. In the case for the in the case of the NetBeans, you will notice you will have another paragraph like this, right? Saying like to do your code here or something like that. I don't remember. Anyway, well, the point of this is very, very useful because it helps you out to understand if your environment is set up properly. So what I mean is, if I go here to comp206, we learned this already. And if I click week 10, I will see the message to do your code here. And it's exactly what I type. So now I know everything I'm typing is correctly formatted. This is monumentally important, guys. So don't use several environments. Don't use like Notepad in one side and IDE in another side. You have to be very, very careful. I'm not saying don't do it, but you have to be very, very careful of what you are doing. Okay? Now, since everything is working perfectly and it seems like everything is working as expected. I'm going to create another folder here that I will call GS. I don't want to mess around with all the files, not anymore. I mean, it's for learning purposes. We've always been using it inside the root for not having problems, but now you have to understand there are ways to arrange these specific files in order to make more professional, your work more professional, okay? The first thing we have to do is what? Well, download the jQuery as always. Now go to Google, type jQuery, and probably it's the first link as it's happened to me. And download. Remember, it's the uncompressed development jQuery. Okay. If that happens to you, all you have to do is click somewhere in the blank section of your web browser, just right click and save as. Then what do you have to do is go into the project where, or the folder where your project is being developed. So remember, htdocs, the folder with your name. In this case there are two, and remember this folder that I created, I will put it over there. Okay. Now in your IDE, you should have something like this. That means it's working perfectly. I'm working in the correct path. Okay? Now, I will put this guy over here right in my code. Remember to drag it. It is important to drag it because automatically your IDE will choose the correct address. Look at the address. Now it's telling it's inside a folder, GS folder specifically. So do always the drag as possible. Whenever you can do it, because in that way the IDE won't make any mistake, right? But you could if you type it by yourself. If you make a mistake like putting like a capital J, you are done. Okay, that will give you errors. Okay, and actually look, the IDE is already telling me, hey, I cannot resolve the GS, but some IDEs are very are not that picky. Okay, so that is why I use this specific IDE, because it's very, very useful. Now, okay, now the second thing that we have to do is, well, I'm going to use Bootstrap as always, just for formatting purposes. Now I'm going to Bootstrap. Get started. And remember to copy the CSS. Just for formatting purposes, I will just move a little bit this. I don't like to have this line of code like all spread my screen. I don't like that. Anyway, so the other section of the Bootstrap is the body section. There it is. Okay, the JavaScript section. Remember, the first line of this section has to be erased because makes conflict with the version of the jQuery that we are using. Okay. Now, just for formatting purposes, I'm going to move these guys like this. Okay. Awesome. Now, the next thing to do is let me check. Okay, we have the Bootstrap already set it up. We have the jQuery. I think that's pretty much it. Now, the other thing we have to do is to set up our what is it called? Our database. I'm sorry, the Firebase database. So let's go back to our. I'm going to close this. Firebase. And sorry for the language. I've been trying to change it to English, but it's been difficult. And I have to read how to change this. Anyway, so just start. And you should have something similar to this. I will use this prepared database. Okay, remember, The database, in order to set up your database, you have to click in database, and in rules, you have to make sure all the properties are in true. Okay? So in contact list, well, you may see I have already a few data. I will erase everything just to make sure I'm working clean. Okay? Like a fresh new. Now, as we learn in class, right now we're not going to use the typical Ajax to connect to this server, because we are pretending to use a nodeJS server in order to connect. We are pretending to use a nodeJS server in order to get the information from that server. Okay, so in this case, we have to set up our communication to this specific server, which is the Firebase. In this case, Firebase already have all the rules that you need for this, or all the script and all the functionality automatically done for you. So in order to retrieve that information, all you have to do is go into Project Overview, and in here make sure it's the same database that you want to work in, and click in Add Database Firebase to your web application. Clicking there, it will regenerate all the script that you need to make sure your application is retrieving all the information, or is using all the information that all the information for this specific database. Okay, so I'm going to copy all of this, and I will paste over here. But before doing this, since it's a lot of code that I'm going to use over here, I don't like to look like this because it's kind of confusing, right? So I'm going to create another file, JavaScript file, that I will call server.js. Okay, and inside server.js I will paste my script. Okay, but remember, since we are working in a JavaScript, I don't need to put the script. Okay, I don't need to put the script. There is an issue over here. Yeah, I got it. I don't need to use the script. So this script has to be in the index page. So I'm going to paste it over here. Okay. It seems like I have an error. Let me check. Well, oh, I see. Yeah. Okay. So that JavaScript is needed for the correct functionality of my database. But if you see, I have the initialized Firebase without any error, because it's actually, this is a JavaScript code. So basically what I have to do is after this code is running in your application, I have to run what? The server. So that's exactly the same as if I have one single script element and all the code that my Firebase is here giving it to me, and I put it there. But the thing is, it's too much information. It's too much information. I already have a lot with the Bootstrap, so I don't want to make another more information in my web page because it doesn't look nice and it's confusing sometimes. Okay, but now with this done, I believe I can actually start working with my database. So the first thing with my application, the first thing we are going to do is creating the format. Okay, the form. So for that, I will use a div container. Okay, this container is used by Bootstrap as a default for arrangement purposes. Okay, now I'm going to put phone book app. Okay, and I will create my form, the form that I need. For that, just go back to Bootstrap and remembering content component properly. Yeah, in components you will have our typical form. Yes, Copy that guy and paste it. Awesome. Now all you have to do is change in a few things. So the first thing is for name, type text, and the ID of this guy will be name. And the placeholder will be enter name. Alright? As always, I will erase this small element or tag because I don't use that. Anyway, so 4 in this case will be the address, right? Type text as well. And yeah, and the placeholder will be enter address. I don't need this form check. I never use it. And in these cases, of course, it's very useful, but I'm not using it right now. Anyway, so, and I have a submit button, but I'm not going to work with the submit. Remember, we're using JavaScript for all the logic or to connect to the database. I don't need to connect to the server, to this specific server to send the information. I am using the firebase database server in order to store and retrieve my information. That means, if you are wondering, yes, you can work with several servers at the same time, of course. Your application may have N or X amount of servers. Could have an access to X amount of servers in order to retrieve or do all the logic. Yes, of course you can. Now, in this case, I'm going to use the type button, and I will leave it as a primary. No, I don't like that color. I will put only the regular standard button because it's kind of gray and I like it. And I have to create another button. And here is insert new contact, and in here I will put a address book, because this specific button will tell me or will redirect me to the other page, right? And the last thing right now I want to add is like an information, a feedback, so I know everything is working perfectly. So I'm going to add here a message. So using the Bootstrap, there is an alert section that you can use in order to get the proper message. All right. So to make it easy to you, okay, what I'm going to do is, well, actually, no. Let's go to the hard way, because it's a good way to do it. Okay, it's supposed to be like this. Now, I'm going to create another div. In this div, I will call it feedback. ID equal to server response. Or yeah, I know I said feedback, but I'm going to call it server response. It's more professional that way. Okay, so if I save this, remember to save this. Let me check if I'm getting everything correctly. So I reload my page. Let me check if I have any error. Nope. It seems like everything is working perfectly. You see, in no time we have the exact same formatting that we had in our original application, right? Now, okay, it's almost done. I mean, all the form is ready. So now it's time to get our hands dirty with our coding. Let me check. Let me think. Now we can retrieve the information. For that, I'm going to use the server file. Okay, And this server file is where I'm going to put all the logic that I need in order to retrieve information, to store information, and so on and so forth. Okay? Okay, now the first thing we have to do is insert new values, right? Because if we start with the retrieve, since we don't have anything inside our database, nothing will be shown. Now let's go to insert a new contact list, okay? So I'm going to create a function called insert new contact, okay? Now, this new contact has two parameters. How do I know I have two parameters? Because if we go back to our application, we have two parameters. Well, actually, there is an error over here. I see email address and password. Let's go to correct that already. Yeah, it's here. So that would be the name. And this should be the address, right? Okay, cool. Now save this. Let's go to reload this. I have a problem with the server JS. Oh, okay, that's right. Yeah, that's right. We didn't comment this guy. So let's go to comment for now because I want to make sure my form is looking correctly or is looking exactly how I want it to look. Now I have name and address, okay? Perfect. Now we are working. We are getting something. Now, okay, let's go back to our function. So as I was saying, how do I know how many parameters I'm going to put in my database? Well, since we have only two fields, we are going to input two parameters. So I'm going to use the function insert new content, and inside the argument section of the function, the definition, which is the parentheses, in the parentheses section I will create a name and address. Okay? Remember, according to JavaScript, you don't need to specify what data type is. It will accept whatever. Okay? Now we have defined our function here. Now, there is another thing. Right now, we are accepting the name and address for this specific function to store. But as you may notice, as you may know, the Firebase works with the with a key. Whenever we try to store something inside the database, it needs a key, all right, to be unique. So database will know this specific object is entirely unique within this specific database. So let's go to the documentation of the database first. So the Firebase in this case. So we will know how exactly to get this specific key. Now, well, actually I was cheating over here. Let's go to access the Firebase. All right, and in Firebase, click on Firebase. I managed to change the language finally, and go to Docs. Okay, documentation, and there you will have the Guides tab. Click in Guides tab, and in there you will find the real-time database option. And in there, you will find the read and write data. In there, the first thing they tell you is to get a reference to the database service. So I'm going to copy this guy. Okay, inside my function. But since we are going to get a new key, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is create a function because I wanted to make it more clear, right? Get new key. Okay, I'm going to create another function. Now I'm going to define my database over here. Okay, the database variable. Now that's the first step. According to this, well, this is a function for writing the user. But before going there, you see, it's asking you an user ID, which I don't have, right? And if you remember for the last class, what we did is like generate a random number and multiply that random number by, I don't remember, like a 1 million or something, in order to get a very long number, and it should be unique enough. But the thing is, there is a slight possibility, very minimal, but there is a slight possibility that number repeats, and then you will get weird errors, like updating another file. Probably the Firebase will throw you an exception telling you cannot set a new contact list or contact because that ID is taken already. So before going to the right method or function, we need to get that specific ID. And guess what? If you scroll a little bit down, the Firebase actually has a function that retrieves a new key. So for us, we are going to copy this specific post key example, but we are going to change it accordingly, all right? So in our case, it's not post, it's a contact key, okay? Contact key. And look, it's making a reference to the database. Since I have the reference to the database, all I have to do is replace this with database. Let's code, my friend. Let's code. And in post, I'm not going to have any child named post in this specific database, but I'm going to use contact list. And I'm going to push the function push, and I will retrieve what? The key. That's the key parameter here. The key is the key. Now, let's go to see if it works. Now, I'm going to, just for practice purposes, I'm going to retrieve this new contact key. Okay? And basically, whenever I call this function, something will be retrieved if everything is working perfectly. Now, I'm going back to the index. And since I have in the server, everything seems okay. Now, I'm going to a script, and I'm going to call the function get new key. Okay? Now, let's see if it works. Going back to my title. Now it seems like it's working. I'm retrieving a new key. So I don't need to create a random number. That's the best part of it. Okay? So if I reload it several times, you see the key is actually changing all the times. All the time it's getting a new key. It's unique. Okay? So far so good. Now I'm going to erase this because I don't want to work with the this new key alone. Now, since it's working, I'm going back to the server. Okay, so I need the insert new contact name and address, right? Excuse me. Now, I don't need the key because the key will be generated automatically by this function. So if I want to get this new contact key, all I have to do is return it. Return new contact list. Or new contact key, sorry. Now I have my key. Just for the sake of this example, I'm going to... No, that's fine. I think it's good enough. Now, since I'm going to insert a new contact, the first thing I have to do is, just for good practice purpose, I'm going to create a new contact object. New contact, okay, equal to an object that is called name. name, right? And the other property for this guy will be the address. Okay? Cool. Now I have my new contact defined over here. So let's go back to the documentation. So now we can see the code for this specific right user data. So I don't mind about the user ID anymore. I don't need that because I'm automatically generating this number. Okay, so it is saying Firebase database reference users. In this specific case, this won't be my address for my database. So that would be probably contact list, right? And I will set whatever the object is. You see? And that's it. That's pretty much. So I'm going to copy this guy up to here, I believe. Yeah. Now, you know what? Let's go to do it. Let's go to do it manually. So I'm going to the... Yeah. So I'm going to call the variable database equal to firebase dot database. Okay, which is a function, right? Probably it's just an object. It is probably an object that they define a class that they define. Well, remember in JavaScript there is no such a thing as a class, but they can make it work. Anyway, so the database, according to the documentation, is database reference, and here we need to make what the specific address is. In this case will be contact list. That's the name of our table, sort of speaking. Okay, and remember to use the slash, otherwise it won't work. Plus what? The ID key for this specific new contact. So in this case I'm going to use the get new key directly. Get new key. Perfect. Now, what else is the documentation saying? So I have to set. What I'm going to set is my object new contact. That's pretty much it. And if passes this point, if reaches this point, that means everything was kind of nice. So I'm going to, after inserting this value, let's check one thing in the documentation. And yeah, listen or value event. To read the data at the path, listen the change use on or once method. Yeah, this is for reading, but I'm not looking that. I'm looking to... But you know what? Let's go to make it simple. Let's go to pretend everything is working perfectly right now, because this is only for teaching purposes. Now, if it reaches this point, the data was stored correctly. Okay? Now, I'm going to what? Go back to index. Remember the server response division that we create? Now is the moment to use it. So the first thing we are going to use, since we are using jQuery over here, right? And I'm going to use the $sign and reach my little guy, server response. Yeah. Server response dot HTML. What is this used for? This is to wipe everything inside the division, the div tag element. Okay, now in here I'm going to display same guy, server response dot append, right? Because I'm going to append something in it. And let's see what we are going to append. What we are going to append is basically what the Bootstrap is telling me to append. So what I mean with that, go back to Bootstrap, and is our alert. So in this case, since it's working, I'm going to give, this is a success alert. Let's go to look for the success example, which is this one. Okay. Now I'm going to append. Of course, this is gonna give me an error, right? In order to avoid this, just paste it in a single quotation marks or double quotation. That will work as well. Double quotation and then paste all the information. It will be exactly the same. But since I'm having classes and everything, let's go to use the single quotation marks, because I'm not quite sure if your IDE will do it automatically like mine. So let's go to use it like this, okay? And I can erase this guy. I don't need this plus, yeah, I don't need this either. And that's pretty much it. So now let's go back to the index, and I'm going to create a script. Remember, since we're using the jQuery, I'm going to create another script, and I'm going to assign this button for insert new contact. Okay? So in order to do that using jQuery, you have to always use jQuery as possible. Okay? Now, I'm going to call the document, okay, which is the DOM document, and I'm going to tell if it's ready. Yes. If it's ready, I'm going to create a function. And in here, I'm going to assign, let's go to the ID button. What is the ID button? I don't have an ID button over here, so I'm going to define a new ID for this specific button, which is the, let's go to call it new contact button. Let's go to put it something more meaningful, but okay. So in this case will be, the ID will be new contact button dot on, in order to assign a specific event listener, right? And I'm going to tell what function I'm going to call every time I click on this guy. And guess what? The function is insert new contact. Okay? But the problem is, there is no problem, I guess. Yeah, well, the problem is I need to define what this name and address is before assigning this guy. So in order to do that, I cannot directly do it. I mean, I can, but it won't work with my functionality. So I'm going to create another function over here in my script outside the document ready section, because I would like to have this function available whenever this document is done. So I'm going to add a function function called insert data. Okay? And insert data will call the specific insert section for my database. But here I'm going to call the insert data. Click. Okay, let's go to check if it's working as I am expecting. I'm going to make this for testing purposes. All right. So let's see. I have my button. It seems like everything is perfect. Go back to your. Oh, it's telling hello. It shouldn't say hello. It should click new contact button. It's actually not working. So let's see what is happening. New contact button on click. Yes, when the document is ready, a function. Oh, that is the problem. It shouldn't be a function, right? It shouldn't be a function. That's why. That is why it's giving me an error, because it's making an action. So it shouldn't be a function. And I just have to tell whatever is done. Let me check if it's not giving me any errors. Okay, so let's check. Let's go to the jQuery documentation. Sometimes that happens, even to me. jQuery document ready, right? Let's see. So according to the documentation, is the jQuery? Yes. So ready function is supposed to be ready, right? So let me check. Ready console ready. Yeah, it's supposed to add. Oh, my error, it wasn't like that actually. No, it was okay. So I shouldn't leave like I had it before, but the thing is, I have to call it like this probably. Let's check. Now we are talking. Okay, so the trick was, because remember in JavaScript, I totally forgot about that. In JavaScript, whenever we use the single parentheses, I'm telling JavaScript perform this function. Perform this function. If I don't use that, it's telling you, okay, assign this guy whenever this button is clicked. Okay, so it was done correctly using the function approach, and here, but the only error we had is we were trying to perform this insert data. That is why whenever I reload this page, it's showing me directly hello, but whenever I click it, it is not working, because actually the program is working exactly what I want to do. Remember, the computers never make a mistake. It's only the developers who makes mistakes. So if I erase that, now every time I click, I will get the hello. Okay, perfect. Now, since it's working, that is why it's always good to do this kind of testing for you guys to understand if what you're doing is correct. Okay, step by step. Doesn't matter if it takes a little bit longer, but since it's working now, you don't have to go back, understand what is wrong, like I did. Okay, now let's go to the server. Now we have the insert new contact over here, so it's asking for 2 arguments over here in order to work correctly. So those arguments is what? Are those 2 guys over here, the name and the address. So insert data will call the function insert new contact. So I will call insert new contact. Okay. So in here, who I'm going to, so just to make it more clear, I'm going to create a variable called name equal to who? Well, the $sign in my ID will be name dot val, and variable address will be equal to $sign address dot val. Now I'm asking the jQuery or JavaScript to perform this val function. According to the documentation of the jQuery, val is going to retrieve whatever is inside this input section. Okay. Now we have that. Now we can call the insert new contact without any problem. So it will be name address. Okay. So it seems like everything is done correctly. So let's go to see if it's working. Now let's go to reload this guy, and let's go to check the database first. You can click go to console. In this case will be, I believe, is phone book database. So I'm going to clean all these guys. Okay, perfect. Now let me save it, go back, reload this guy, and I will put my name Louis, and let's go evergreen. That's my address, and let's go to insert a new contact. Well, it seems like it worked. This is a success alert. Check it out. Well, we forgot to change the message for this, but that's okay. At least it's working. So let's go to the phone book. And it worked. Evergreen the address, and the name is Louis. Perfect. Okay. Now let's see. This is weird. How is showing this Louis and curious. Let's go back to the server. And yeah, everything seems correct over here. Okay, whatever. So in this message, I'm going to change the message, the data, new contact was stored correctly. Awesome. Now we are inserting information. Okay, perfect. Now in here in index, since I don't like how, I'm just going to use a break section over here, so I have some space in between my form and my server response. I don't like everything together like it showed before. Remember, I don't like this. So I'm just putting this break for formatting purposes. Okay. Now pretty much we finished with this. Now let's go to create another file, HTML file. In this case, I'm going to call this guy contactlist.html. Contactlist.html. Okay. Now in contact list, you should have something similar to this. What I'm going to do is, since I'm going to use a lot of things very similar to this, I don't have to copy the whole thing like a brand new. So just copy everything, copy and paste it. Make sure you select the code that is made for you automatically, erase that and paste it. So you should have a page exactly the same as in index. Okay. Now go back to index. And let's go to assign another function to the button. Whenever I click the button address book, I'm going to contact list HTML. So in order to do that, just do the same step you did before. And I'm going to assign, in this case, I'm going to give the ID to the button. Yeah, why not address book button? Okay, now address book. Oops, I have a typo here. Address book button. Perfect. On click, comma, I will call the function I haven't created yet, redirect address book. Okay, now I'm going to create another function, redirect address book. No arguments. And what I'm going to do is window location href. Since this is a property, I'm going to tell where to go. So it will be contact list. If you don't want to make a mistake, just try to refactor this guy, rename it, and copy the whole name. Always do it like that, because you won't believe how many times I've been having this kind of errors. Like, I don't know exactly what is happening. It was only a typo, right? So in order to avoid those type of things, just copy and paste the name, and whatever it is, it will you will get it right. Okay. So far so good. So now I'm going to save this guy and go to the contact list HTML, and I'm not going to use this script, but I'm going to use the server. I'm going to use the query, jQuery, the bootstrap, which is correct, and the form I will use it to edit my specific items. Okay, but I'm going to put this phone book contacts. Okay, so I'm doing this to make sure I'm showing the correct page, right? I'm changing these contacts. So let's go to see if it's working. I have the buttons over here. Okay, that's cool. So let's go back to the, let's reload this guy. And if I, whoops, redirect address book is not defined. Let's go back to our code. You see what happened? A typo. That's what I'm saying. Always copy and paste. You see, I'm not the sanction of the rule. That happened to me as well. So always copy and paste to make sure you're working in the correct variable or function names and everything. So let's go back. Now I'm not having any errors. And if I click address book, I'm getting phone book contacts. And look at the contact list HTML. So it's working perfectly. Okay. Now let's go back to the contact list. Now in here the purpose is getting all the list, right? But before doing that, I would like to separate this page into two. So in one section I will have the list of my contacts, or my contact list, and the other section will be to edit a specific ID, okay, or contact. So let's go to see how to do that. In order, I need the Bootstrap to help me out. So in the layout section, you will find a grid, and grid is very useful. Grid is actually the best way to arrange things. That's why Bootstrap is very powerful, right? So let's go to create. You see, that's exactly what I'm looking for. Dividing my page into two sections. So it's saying, I need a container. We already have that. The container here, right? Perfect. Now we need to define a class row. We haven't defined that. And we have one column and another column. So that's exactly what I'm looking for. I'm going to copy the row only because I have a container already, or we have a container already, right? So inside the container, I'm going to put this. since this guy will be my name of my class, I will put it outside the column. I don't want them to be messed up. And in this class row will be 1 of 2. In the 2 of 2, I'm going to copy also this. Yeah, I'm going to cut the section. I'm going to repeat this step. I'm going to cut, including the server response. Okay, got to cut everything and paste it in the place of the 2 of 2. Okay, so I'm going to save. Remember to arrange all your code. Well, my IDE did it automatically. So if I save this and go back to the contact list, reload this, look at how it looks. Now it's divided into 2. Very convenient, right? All right. Now in here, I'm going to display all the information. For that, let's go back to the server. Now it's time to get a function, to create a function to get the data. Get contacts. Okay. Yeah, because I'm using data for something else, right? So let's go to call it contacts. Get contacts. So let's go back to the Firebase documentation. Oops. So just type Firebase. Well, it seems like directly reach me to the docs section. But anyway, if you got this page, just click on docs, and in here, go to guides. Again, to real-time database, read and write data. So let's go to see what have for reading data. So this is the following example demonstrates social blogging, retrieving the star count. So probably I will have this working, but let's see first. This is for writing. Yeah, it seems like the example they have is this function over here. So don't worry. I think that's the perfect, actually that's the perfect example. So, but since we don't have, we want to retrieve the whole information, right? We want to retrieve the whole information of the database. So in this case, check read data once. No, that's not what I want. Listen to value events. No. The following example. No. Basic write operations. Listen. Read data once. Updating or deleting data. Delete data. Detach save data. Write and offline. No. Seems like it's not. The only example they have is the read data. Okay, so let's see. Return firebase database reference. We're not going to use this once a keyword, right? Okay, so let's see. Okay, so it seems like the documentation is not quite clear in this opportunity. So let's go back. In this example, actually, is exactly what I'm looking for, but they're making an update function. They call it an update function. Probably they generate that in their example. We're not interested in that right now. However, there is a section here, this specific section here, actually this one, right? That's exactly what I want. The start count ref in this case, but don't worry, we're going to go through this and we're going to investigate how exactly this example is going. So the first thing we have to do is the Firebase database reference. So let's go back to our get contents, and I'm going to create the database equal to Firebase dot database. Okay, that's the first step. Now, since I want to get all the contacts, right, I'm going to call the database, and according to the documentation, you have to use the function on, which is defined in your nodeJS server. Remember, those are functions that are defined in this nodeJS server. We are pretending to connect to a nodeJS server. Now, the database on now is telling you have to have the name of your variable and have a function for that. Okay, cool. Now I'm going to, I'm going to call it, instead of value, I will call data. Okay, and I will use my function, and I will use the keyword data here again, which is not the same. Okay, it's just it needs a name. Apparently it needs a name for retrieving that information. Okay, so let's see if I try to retrieve that information, let's see what happened. So if I go back to the contact list, I'm going to create a new script, okay, and I will use the get contacts function. All right, so go back to your application page, the contact list, make sure you're working in contact list, and reload that. Well, it seems like a database on is not a function. Let's see what happens. Database is not a function. Probably I have a typo here. Let me check if I have a typo. Let's go back to the documentation. Probably I have something wrong in the documentation. And actually I do. You see the reference? I forgot to put the reference. So let's go back to, yeah, it should be the reference. Sorry about that. Let's go to erase everything here. So I have to put the reference. Our reference, as always, will be contact list. Okay? And the documentation is saying nothing else. The reference shouldn't have anything else. And on now is where we put the data, comma, function, data. Okay, remember to open and close the curly braces here to use the semicolon. And let's go to see what I'm retrieving. Okay, so let's see. If I do this, you see, it's actually the keyword has to be value. Has to be value. It cannot be called data. So let's go to change that to value. It seems like they have also all defined, right? So let's see if it works now. Yeah, but I'm having this weird, let's to call it syntaxing, right? They have like a key, they have a lot of things that we don't understand. So, but it's actually an array, okay? So if I want to work with an array, all I have to do is data, which is this variable that I'm getting, right? And this data will actually work with the for each function. Now, inside this for each, as we have practiced before, I have to use a function with the item and the index, right? Now I'm going to work with the item section or the item variable. So let's go to see what I'm getting whenever I'm trying to retrieve the item. Okay? So it seems like it's not working. Let's see. Yeah, it's not. Let me check one thing. Oh, I see the problem. You see, we stored our information in contact without the T. And I'm using a T over here. Again, the typos. You have to be very careful about this, right? So I'm going to leave it as a contact without the T list. Just for the purpose of this exercise, I don't want to change anything and go back to the... So I have to make sure it's the same thing I'm getting information from, because what it was happening is trying to get the contact list, and since there is nothing stored there, I'm not getting anything, right? Now, let's see now if it works. Now again, we are getting this weird behavior or syntaxing, right? But look at this. Are you familiar with this? Now, it is actually the ID we used. Go back to your Firebase database and go to console, phone book, and database. Let's see if it's the same. Sorry. Yeah, it's here. Yep, it seems like it is the same. All right. So, yeah, we are getting here now. Since we are retrieving this object, now the object has two specific properties, right? The address and name properties. But in order to retrieve the whole information, all I have to add is the val function. And again, this is another function that is defined inside of my Firebase. Okay, so if I save this, now we are getting the object, the exact object I'm looking for, you see? But I don't have any ID. So in order to retrieve that, the ID key, all I have to type is item key. So if I do that, I'm getting only the key, which is basically this ID that we have here. Okay? Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Okay, now since I know how to retrieve the key, I know how to retrieve the properties, all I have to do now is to assign that to every single specific list item inside my form or inside my page, right, in order to display that information. So let's see how to do that. So since we're working now with every single item that is stored inside my Firebase, all I have to do is putting that information inside my form, or in this case my web page. For that, I'm going back a little bit, and I'm going to create a var, and I'm going to call it contact list. But the contact list will hold three properties, right? The property of the name, the property of the address, and the ID. But no, I'm not going to use that. I'm going to call this var results. Okay? And that will be an array. Awesome. Now in here, I'm going to create a variable. Now I'm going to create a variable. I will call it contact list equal to what? Well, it will be the ID. Let's go to call it ID item.key. Okay, and the name will be the item dot, remember the val. Why val? Because whenever we did the example of val, what we are getting is an object. Well, actually, I erase. Let me see if I go back. No, well, it's not going to be displayed. Whenever we try the val, actually what we are getting is an object, a JavaScript object with two properties, name and address. So I'm going to put here the name property, and the address will be equal to item.val again to retrieve my JavaScript object, and then address. Make sure you are working with the correct names, otherwise you will have errors, right? Since it's not recognizing my name and address. Let's see if it works, okay? So I'm going to, after defining this variable, I'm going to display this guy. So if it's working correctly, I'm going to have contact list. Okay, so if I'm doing it correctly, I will have a variable, a JavaScript object with these three properties defined. So let's see. If I reload this, I'm not getting anything, and that is why. Let me check. Let me erase this for a second. Okay. Not retrieving anything, so function data. Let's go to see if it's working correctly. Let me check the data first. No, in this case it's item, right? Sorry. Oh, it is because I'm not working with the contact list. Sorry about that. Okay. Now reload this. Okay, I'm getting the information. Now I'm going to put the address back. Item.val.address. And don't forget the comma here. And I'm going to display the contact list. Okay. All right. Now we get everything we need, right? We get the ID, we get the name, and we get the address in a single object of JavaScript. That is so convenient. Now, since I want to display this information every time I'm loading, so what I'm going to do is refer to my server response in this case. Not server response, I'm sorry. Let's go back to contact list, and I haven't defined the name of the column, I mean the name of the division that I'm going to display this information to. So let's go back to the Bootstrap, and in content, component, list group. That's the one I'm looking for. And I want to display like this. So I'm going to copy this example, okay, and paste it over here. If I did it correctly, let's go back to save, and I got the answers. Okay, perfect. Now that's the shape of the item that I have to input in order to display this information like this. Okay, now I'm going to call the list group. I'm going to call this equal to contacts. Okay, check the spelling. It is important. You now know that. Okay, so inside contacts, I'm going to erase these guys. Okay, and I'm going to check the I'm going to insert a list item like this. So let's go back to server, and I'm getting every single value in this variable, right? So now the first thing I'm going to do is clean everything up right? Just in case is something there. So I'm going to make a reference to the contacts. You know what? No, we're not going to do that here because it's not convenient. It's not convenience. That will give you like a dependence here in this function, but I'm not going to do that. Instead, for every single data that I'm having here, I'm going to push that information to the result variable that I created, or that we created. So I'm going to results.push, right? And the item will be contact list. Okay, now after the function is done, which is here, I believe, yes. After this for each is done, let me check one thing. Yes, after this for each is done, I'm going to return the results array. Okay, awesome. Now it's looking better. Now go back to your contact list, and here I'm not going to use get contacts anymore like this, because remember, we are returning contact list. We are going to return results, which is an array, right? So go back to contact list, and I'm going to call the variable contacts equal to get contacts, and automatically will give me the array. Okay, now we have the contacts in our variable. Perfect. Now all we have to do is, let's go to change the server response. That's fine. I'm going to need that. And ID contacts is the name of the division, in this case in order list, where I'm going to embed all the information to, right? So for that, I'm going to create a function here. Now, you know what? Since this is going to happen every time I'm loading the page, I'm going to use the document.ready, right? And I'm going to create a function and perform this inside of this function. Now I'm going to use the variable contacts to get the information, and then I'm going to embed all the information inside this division or this unordered list. Awesome. Let's see how to do that. So the first thing we are going to do is clean everything up, right? So the hashtag symbol .html, same trick we did before. Clean everything up. This is for cleaning. Okay, and now I'm going to use the number sign contacts. Okay, and I'm going to append. Now this is kind of tricky, right? This has to be inside for each, because contact is an array, right? So I'm going to use instead for each. Remember the trick: function item index. This is not a trick. This is just the definition of the array. Now contacts, I'm going to every single contact, I'm going to append. What I'm going to append? Well, this specific list item. Okay, remember, I'm going to do it like that to make it more understandable. Remember to put the single quotes and then paste everything inside. Okay, now I'm going to add something called cross just to audio. So basically, in order to add the specific item, I'm going to add the item dot In this case, remember, it's an object, right? With 3 properties: the ID, the name, and the address. So I'm going to put the name only. I'm going to show the name only. Okay? So if it's working correctly, let's save this. Okay? And go back to your code. And it says it's not working because I'm not telling our contacts. Let's see if it's working. Let's go to comment this for a second. And I'm going to display whatever is retrieving with this item to see if I'm getting something. Okay. Well, it seems I'm not retrieving anything, right? And that is probably because this guy is asynchronized. So since this guy is asynchronized, what is happening is I'm trying to do this perform this specific logic before getting any values in contacts. Let me rephrase this. Asynchronized means in JavaScript, whenever we try to get the information from the database, the logic won't stop there. It will continue, even though I don't have any single, or this specific function is not finished. That's how JavaScript is created. So in order to achieve what we're looking for, which is getting these values before performing this logic, we have to do something that we call, or is called in JavaScript, a callback, which is basically wait until this function is done in order to create, or in order to perform this logic. All right? So with that concept in mind, we have to create another function here called populate contact list. Okay? And we created our function. Now inside, we are going to put all the logic that we have so far. Okay? Now, look at this. Since I'm going to call the function after this guy is done, after this function is done, we have to create our callback, thing we haven't done yet. In order to do that, go back to server, and in here, we're going to create the argument callback. Okay? And instead of retrieving, you should have it like this. Return results. You should have it like this right now. Okay. We are going to erase that, and we're going to call back, or call the function that is called callback, and giving the results variable. But look at this. This guy over here is performing after this logic. And remember the definition of JavaScript. Whatever is happening in here will be erased as soon this logic is done. So that means I cannot call back this, because what I'm going to return is nothing. So I have to put this callback in here exactly when your function is finished. So that's what we call in JavaScript callback. After this function is finished, we're going to call this function and give the result, whatever they are. So let's see if it works. It has to be outside the for each though, because if it's inside, what I'm going to return is only one value. So we have to wait until all the for each is done, and then the results will be populated with all the information, right? So now, after this logic is done, we can call our function without any problem. So go back to contact list, and the other issue is I have to give what the function is. Remember in JavaScript, if we leave the parentheses, I'm telling JavaScript perform this specific function right now, which is not exactly what I want. I want to wait until this get context is done. So, but another issue is raising now. I'm trying to define or to specify a populate contact list function which is not created yet. When I call this guy, this function is not created or defined yet. So I have to make sure to call this after the function is defined. Does it make sense? I hope it does, because it's like remember the JavaScript is relational. It's not relational. Sorry, it's order language. So whatever is first will be performed first, and then will perform the other thing. Okay. Now, since we are not returning anything, we actually eliminate the return keyword. You see, so we're not returning anything. So I don't need that variable anymore. All right. Now let's see if it works. So go back to your phone book, and if I reload, I'm getting an error. Contact for each is not a function. Let's go back. Oh, since I'm not putting any argument inside the populate contact list and I'm sending the results, I have to give a name for that specific value. Contacts in this opportunity. Okay, so I'm going to rerun this guy. Now finally we got the information. Okay, so basically what we're doing over here is just a callback. It's a little technique. It's a very useful technique whenever you know this function that you're trying to create takes more time than the actually running time. So you have to do it this approach in order to finish or to achieve this specific logic. Now, with this done, now we're getting a value over here. We can uncomment these three guys. So if we did it correctly, let's see if it's working perfectly. Expected token. So it seems like I'm having a problem. Yeah, I'm missing single quote over here. Okay, and it seems like having another error. Oh yeah, sure. And I'm having a typo here. Okay, append, and I should have. Yep. Actually, this shouldn't be here. Like this. Okay. Now let's see. Finally, we're getting our Lewis. Okay, cool. Now let's see if it works with several values, shall we? So I'm going to erase this and going back to the main of the phone book app, and I'm going to create another contact. Peter Parker, New York. Insert new contact. New contact was stored correctly. Go back to the address book, and we have our two contacts perfectly. So now the other thing that we are missing over here is giving this guy an ID, right? So we can reach that specific item for later in our code. So in order to do that, I'm going to create our ID attribute. In this case, I'm going to use the double quotes and use a single quote over here, because that's the single quote we're using for separating our arguments, or to input the argument inside this line over here. Okay, now in here I'm going to use the item.id. How do I know it's ID? Well, remember whenever we get the value from this specific logic, we are getting a property of ID. If you don't remember what property is ID, you can go back to server, and in the definition, you see all the items that are stored in the results array has three purposes: ID, name, and address. So I'm only working with ID in this moment. Okay? All right. So I have the ID. and item ID. So let's see if it works. So it seems nothing has changed, right? But actually it does. If you inspect this guy over here, the Lewis, look at this. ID. Do you recognize the number? It's exactly the same number. If we go back to the phone book database, it's exactly this ID that we're getting. So now we not only populate our list, but we have the ID for every specific item over here. If we reach the Peter Parker, whoops, sorry. If we reach the Peter Parker, inspect, and you see it has another item, ID, I'm sorry, YTLF2. So let's see, YTLF2, correct. So basically this is the same ID as we have here in our components. So this is a critical step, because whenever we click here, we have to populate the name and the address. All right. Now, it's almost done here. And the other thing that we want to do is, since we are getting all the information over here, I don't want to go back to the database and retrieve the ID or the in this case the address, right? So there is several ways to do it, and one thing that I'm thinking right now is actually let me check. I can put the value in there, yeah, but the other way to do it is creating hidden values or hidden elements. Okay, so but the thing is, we will need to create another ID, and this is not the specific approach for this specific exercise. So we have to figure another way to do this, because in this item, in this list item, there is no place that I can put the address and store it, so I can retrieve the information, right? So I can actually show the information and edit it accordingly. So one way to work around with this problem is just simply creating a global variable. So in order to create our global variable, I will call this guy results. Okay. And results will be equal exactly the same as contacts. So I don't need to put it inside the for each, because it's like useless. I know results will be equal to contacts. Will be exactly the same. So I don't need to go through any other thing over here. So let's see if it works. I'm going to go back to my application, and if I type here results, I'm getting both values already. Cool, huh? All right. Now we're getting somewhere here. Now we have to assign to every single list item the ability to click, and whenever it clicks, something has to show. All right. So for that, we're going to use the jQuery for that. Yeah. So in that, you already append that. Yes. After the append, exactly after the append, I'm going to call the new created element, which has this item. But look at this. If I try to give this element the selector item ID, it won't be recognized, because actually what you are saying here is you are trying to find an element called item with the ID item, and inside it has the class ID, which is not exactly what we want, right? It's all messed up. So in order to do that, we have to create a variable called selector equal to item.id, and before that we're going to put the hashtag element. That's one way to do it. It's just This is for getting the selector key. Okay. Now, in the jQuery definition, so we can use now the selector. So on, click, but look at this. This is something new. We want to pass data to that specific function now because we want to get the address as well, right? We have it here in the result, but we have to let it know what index is this. Okay? So passing the index is actually passing the value of whatever we have there. Okay? So on that, we have to use the, let's go to call it retrieve index. Okay, let's go to call it retrieve index. Oh, I forgot the comma. So, but there is a problem. Okay, let's go to define the function first. Has to be after the ready function because I want this function to be available even though the document is ready loaded. I want to be available when the document is done. Okay, of loading, I mean. So I'm going to create a function called retrieve index, right? And I will accept some kind of info. Let's go to call it info. I'm going to retrieve some kind of info, right? I don't know exactly what it is, but I'm going to get that information. So let's go to the jQuery documentation and just type jQuery on documentation. And in on, you will see the definition is this. First, what the event is. So the event is click. Then the selector. Well, the selector is, I don't have any selector. So the data, now the data has to be before the actually handler. So that means I have to give the item over here. So what I'm going to pass is actually the index. So I'm going to call it index and index, which is the value that I have here. Okay? And comma. Now we're passing the value. So let's check if it's working. So if I want to retrieve this information, I'm going to use the info. So let's go back to the documentation and see how to retrieve this data guy. So the event handler, its documentation, passing data to handler. So in order to retrieve that guy, I have to use the keyword data and then the parameter name. So in this case, we're using the parameter name index. So what I have to put is info.data.index. So if I did it correctly, I should be able to see whenever I click the index of that guy. So let's see. Back to your, now if I click here, I got the index 0 and the index 1. Perfect. Now, the thing that is left is actually trying to populate this section of the form over here. All right. So to do that, let's go back to our form. So we call that a name, an address, and I think it's good enough because it's going to be unique, right? So I'm going to erase this because I don't like to have that glitch happening. Okay. Now, in this retrieve index, I'm going to give, in this case will be address, I believe. Yeah, no, name. Okay, name. Oh, but one thing. You know what? It's better. Actually, we don't have to use the variable results at all. Right? Yeah, I can actually, oh, look at this. This is very useful. This is a better approach. So let's go to erase the result. And because I'm not going to use that, it's not necessary. So in my passing value, look at this. It's even better. So I can pass the address. Actually, I can pass the item itself. I can pass the item like this. Okay, so now I can retrieve the whole thing without using that variable info.data, for example. Okay, so I'm going to retrieve everything from here. Let's see if it works. It's loading. Okay, so let's check. Okay, yeah, I'm getting the whole thing. You see, it's not necessary to actually wait for that to be populated. It's gonna take more work. This is easier way. Awesome. All right. Now, okay, with that in mind, all I have to do is use the info data formatting for my variable. I mean, for every single variable, right? So if you want to avoid using info data all the time, all you have to do is like contact equal to info.data. Okay. All right. Now we have our object over here. Now I'm going to populate the hashtag address, right? Populate the address, and with that I will put the, since it's a, I believe I can give the value. Let me check if this is accepting. Okay. I believe that is okay. Let me check. Yeah, but I put it in the wrong place. So it's not address, it's actually name. Awesome. Now do the same for the address. And instead of the name, that will be the address. We're getting there. We're getting there. Now, we need to pass inside this form the ID as well, because the ID will be needed whenever we want to update a specific value, right? So in order to do that, now I'm going to create another div here. Oh, not a div, actually, an input. Well, yeah, a div. First of all, let's go to define this form group. And I will put an input type hidden. Okay. And the ID will be the contact ID. Okay. Now I can set the value to this guy without showing that information to the user. So it will be populated all the time. So now I'm going to populate this guy to the numeral, hashtag contact ID. Contact ID dot val info dot data dot ID. It is called ID, right? Check. Yeah, it ID. Now let's see if it works. So let's reload this. So I'm populating with evergreen. So let's see and inspect this guy. I know it's somewhere here. I know it's not showing anything. So I'm going to inspect, and in here it should be a division with the hidden. And the ID is the contact ID, and the value is this a specific value for this guy. So if I click, look how dynamically change. You see? So that's exactly what we want. All right. Now let's go to give some some logic to these buttons. In this case, I'm not going to keep it called like insert new address, but I'm going to put insert new contact. I will call it edit contact. Okay, and I can leave this guy to go back, probably or delete. Let's go to delete this guy. Okay. No, you know what? I'm going to go back in a new item. So it will retrieve me the information, or will go back to the main page, right? So I think it's good enough for this exercise. Otherwise, it will take too long for doing all the operations, right? Yeah. So this button will perform some kind of operation whenever I click it. So I'm going to use the document ready function in order to give some logic to this button. New contact, well, I will call it edit contact now. Edit contact. Okay. Now in edit content, I will call the function, not the function, I'm sorry. Edit contact button. All right. Dot on click on click, and I'm going to perform a function over here. So that function will be edit contact that I haven't created yet. So in here, before this, I'm going to create the other function, edit contact. Okay. Now edit contact, what it will do is storing the information back there in my database, right? So let's go back to the server, and in here I will get the function edit contact. So I'm going to, okay, so since I have several edit contacts and it can be confusing, I'm going to rename this guy edit data. Okay, and here will be, sorry, edit data. Cool. Now I don't need any information in here, so instead I'm going to edit contact over here, and I need three things over here. I need the ID, I need the name, and I need the address of the new item, right? So now I have to retrieve this information. I have to retrieve or make sure the reference is the specific item that I want to change, and then give whatever the new values are. So for that, I'm going to database equal to firebase the database. Okay, same as always. Now in here I'm going to use the database dot reference, right? But in this opportunity I'm going to use this reference, yeah, plus the ID, which is the ID that I want to change, right? So on yeah, let me check. not actually not on, it's actually set, right? Because I'm going to set a new contact, not a new contact, but I'm going to set the same information. So for that, I'm going to create another variable called contact equal to an object, which is name. In this case will be name, and address, the address. Set contact. So basically what I will do is check for this guy. If it exists, just put the new values over there. Okay, so let's see if it works. All right, so let's check. Oh, but before we have to pass this information to the new function that we created, right, which is edit contact. So I'm copying the name of the function so I don't make any mistake, and I'm going to create my contact. Yeah. So I'm going to create, you know what? I'm going to make it even easier. I'm going to call this name contact. So I know the contact will have 3 issues, 3 items, right? So instead of using the ID, so I'm edit contact. Okay, so I'm going to erase this guy over here, and contact in this case will be ID. I know the object that I'm passing will have the ID, right? So I haven't defined it yet, but I know it should have the ID. And in here, in edit contact, I'm going to define this guy. It's even better to do it like this. So will be the contact dot name and contact dot address. And what I will set is edit contact. Awesome. Seems like it's working perfectly. Let's see. Now I'm going to create a variable contact again equal to, the ID will be equal to, the ID will be equal to this guy over here, contact ID. Value. Name will be the name will be name. So I just copy this guy. And this is a comma. And address will be all right. So I'm going to perform the edit contact and we'll pass the contact. So let's see if it works. So I reload this. I check this guy. Let's go to call it Fernando. And I will call the edit. So it seems like it's working, you see? Whenever I edit, it's actually returning the whole page again. So, but it's not showing, it's actually giving me the same information as before, right? So actually you see it's working perfectly, but the problem is I don't want these guys to be displayed, right? So in order to do that, let's see. So whenever I call edit contact, we'll go back. So in order to avoid this, I'm just going to call the results, which is the column contacts, this guy over here, and I will .html and put it in blank. Okay. Now let's see. Okay, so now I have Fernando and New York. I'm Peter Parker, sorry. Let's say I make a mistake. It's not Peter Parker. It's actually Dr. Fantastic. Edit contact. And now it seems like... Okay, now I see what is happening. Since I have this cleaning over here, I have to find a perfect place to put it. I think it's before the edit contact actually. So let's go to back. I have Dr. Fantastic. Let's say is Peter Parker. Still not cleaning, not doing what I want. So let's see. Edit contact button, the edit contact button. Edit data will perform the contact. Let's see in the server. So basically what is happening is whenever I have a new, it's retrieving my new information. So I think the best place to do it is actually over here. I wanted to avoid this, but I think it's not possible to do that anymore. Probably here. Let's try. Let's go to change the name to Peter. Nope, it's not changing. Now, it seems like this is not the correct approach then. But if we think about what the error is actually retrieving some information. Some information is staying back in the page. So I believe the problem is actually this result over here. Because every time we're performing this variable is still alive. So in order to avoid that problem, it's actually putting over here in every single time we are calling this function. So it will be destroyed. Every time this specific function finished, this variable will be destroyed. So let's see if it works. Okay, so let's go back to our application. Fernando, Peter, and let's go to put it back to Peter Parker. Now it seems like it's working. Let me check. Now my name is Louis. Yeah, now it's working. Yeah, it's kind of creepy. One single line of code could do to your code, right? And yeah, that's pretty much it. And if I click new item, now it's not doing anything. So it's actually the next step that we're going to do. So let's go back to our code. And that should be very easy to do, because what I want to do is actually make it this button to change it to the other page. So I'm going to call this, you know what? I'm going to copy this guy, the same name of button. Oh no, it can't be. So I'm going to call this ID equal to new item button. Okay, and I will add here, I'm going to copy this guy, new item button. And I will show you another way to do this straight ahead. So instead of calling the edit data, I will use a function because it's asking for a function, right? And what I will do is window location href equal to index.html. All right. So if I reload this, I can put a new item, and let's say I put incredible Hulk, New York. I think he lives in New York as well. Insert new contact, and if I go back to the let's say, oh, I made a mistake. It's not New York. It's Carolina. Yep, it seems like it changed perfectly. Okay, guys, I think this is all for this application. All you have to do now is going back to your folder and wrap it up into a zip file and send it back to the where the posting or the Dropbox is. Okay. Well, thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope it is very convenient for you guys to follow all these instructions. You may understand better how to create this application. Okay, take care and see you. Bye-bye.